local campaign, and thank you for joining us for our debate in the riding of Glengarry-Prescott-Russell. In just a moment, I'll introduce to you the candidates who are here for our debate. Here's how the debate's going to work. Each of the candidates will have 1 minute to provide an opening statement, and the order for those opening statements was drawn at random just a few minutes ago. After the opening statements, we'll proceed into a series of debates about the important questions in this campaign, the topics that matter to you, the voters of Glengarry-Prescott-Russell, and all Canadians. In each case, I'll start the discussion with a question directed at one of the candidates. That candidate will have 45 seconds to talk about that topic on his or her own, and then we'll open it up to several minutes of debate and discussion, a free-flowing conversation between all of the candidates. When we wrap up on the topic, we'll go back to the person to whom the question was originally addressed, and he or she will have 30 seconds to close out that topic. Once we've moved through a number of different topics, we'll wrap up with closing statements, and we'll do those in the reverse order of the opening statements. So let's meet the candidates who are here from Glengarry-Prescott-Russell. First is the candidate for the Conservative Party of Canada, Susan McArthur. Representing the New Democratic Party, Konstantine Malakos. From the Green Party of Canada, Danielle Lapierre. And from the Liberal Party of Canada, Francis Drouin. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for being here today. Looking forward to the debate. We'll start with the opening statements. And Susan McArthur, you're first. You have 1 minute.
Terrific. Thank you very much. And hello, everyone. It's great to be here. I would like to thank Rogers for the invitation to today's debate. This is a great opportunity to learn about the candidates and their policies. Canada's Conservatives and Erin O'Toole have an innovative, detailed, and modern plan to secure the future. I'm a bilingual businesswoman who wants to use my expertise and knowledge to bring the solutions to the challenges facing the Canadian economy following the pandemic. I am running in Glengarry-Prescott-Russell because it is important to me to run in a bilingual riding in Ontario, which has enormous potential. When I go door to door and talk to the citizens of Glengarry-Prescott-Russell, it is clear no one wanted this election. People are concerned about COVID, and they're worried about getting their kids back to school. This is just one of the reasons why I want to make a difference. We need more common sense in Ottawa, and I want to implement our Rebuild Canada plan. All right, thank you. Next up, representing the NDP is Konstantine Malakos. Go ahead.
I would like to respectfully acknowledge that Glengarry-Prescott-Russell is on the unceded territory of the St. Lawrence Iroquoian, Omami, Wininewak, Haudenosaunee, and Huron-Wendat people. But we can't just acknowledge it. We actually have to fight for reconciliation, and reconciliation cannot happen without concrete action. Having said that, I want to fight for the people of Glengarry-Prescott-Russell because so many of them are suffering right now. Poverty is out of control. Members of the disabled community are struggling with government-imposed poverty. There's a housing crisis. Our environment is literally on fire. We're seeing forest fires in northern Ontario affecting the air quality in Glengarry-Prescott-Russell. We need action, and I believe that an NDP government is ready to come in and provide that action, and I would like to fight to be a voice for Glengarry-Prescott-Russell in that government.
All right, thank you. Next is the Green Party candidate, Danielle Lapierre. Go ahead.
I am standing up today as a Green Party candidate because I not agree with how Canada has responded to the climate crisis, the pandemic, and the poverty. The government says this is the first time something like this has happened. In reality, it's not true. In 2003, we had the SARS. It was reported that the health system was not well prepared. In 2009, H1N1, and in 2020. Just like the pandemic, climate change is a warning, and it's getting stronger. Let's not be reactionary, but proactive and take care of our future into our hands. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Finally, Francis Drouin, the Liberal candidate. Go ahead, you have 1 minute.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us for this important moment to talk about the future of our riding and talk about the future of our country. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are gathered on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe peoples. I've had the honor and privilege to serve you for almost 6 years, and I'm asking for your vote on September 20th to re-elect a strong local voice for our community. I want to thank the candidates who put their name on the ballot. Having a choice in an election is an important part of our democracy. For me, politics has always been simple. It's about helping people, whether it's saving the location of a community mailbox because it's a social gathering for seniors, or fighting to get infrastructure dollars to support our community. Your issues matter to me. I'm running again because I strongly believe in the values of public service. We have worked hard to deliver results together for our community. My community matters, and it would always come first. And so tonight, I look forward to the debating of ideas. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, candidates, for your opening statements. Let's move to our first discussion topic, and I'll direct a question to Susan McArthur, the Conservative candidate. Your party is promising to balance the budget within 10 years, despite extraordinary deficits because of the COVID-19 crisis. Where would you cut spending in order to be able to do that?
Well, as our leader has very clearly said, we will not be cutting spending. We have a very innovative, modern plan and platform that will get the Canadian economy back to work and growing again. During the Liberal government, for the last 6 years, the economy has not grown. This is a big difference between the Conservative plan and the Liberal plan. In fact, I carry this around with me, which is a graph that shows Canada's GDP per capita. Our productivity has flatlined in the last 6 years, and our GDP per capita and productivity have just gone sideways with the Liberals. We have a plan to grow the economy. It's been tested and fact-checked by Trevor Tome, who's an economist in Alberta at the University of Alberta, and we're confident that we can balance our budget in 10 years.
It's open to everyone now on this topic.
So conservatives love to gauge the health of our economy based on how well the richest people are doing, how well the Bay Street investors are doing, and that's how they gauge the health of the economy. But me, I gauge the health of the economy based on how well the poorest person in the country is doing, how well the person who is the most marginalized is doing. And they're not doing very well right now. If you look around, 44 billionaires made $78 billion during the pandemic. But at the same time, we're seeing poverty that is going out of control and the housing crisis getting worse day by day. People in the disabled community, members of the disabled community, are living in abject poverty that is government imposed because they cannot work and their benefits are too low. People are starving. People in Glengarry-Prescott-Russell are giving up on the democratic process. So we can talk about GDP and all of that all we want. We can talk about the economy in terms of Bay Street and investment and all of that all we want. But I'm interested in hearing how a person in Fournier with boarded up windows who's going to the food bank is going to get ahead. That's what I want to know.
So I just want to get back to the question mark. The Conservatives put a 3% growth rate for 10 years, and they say they'll be able to balance the budget. But we still don't know all their numbers behind the platform. They haven't released it. In fact, I haven't seen that in the last 30 years I have been following politics. I expect that from the NDP, but not from the Conservatives, who say they're a strong economic powerhouse, but yet they're failing to show a costed platform. Secondly, we represent a lot of public servants in Glengarry-Prescott-Russell. They remember when Erin O'Toole was at the cabinet table and they were implementing the Deficit Reduction Action Plan, which costs thousands of jobs in the National Capital Region. So they deserve to know where they're going to cut, because that 3% growth, the former PBO, Kevin Page, already said it's a number made up. Nobody's going to get 3% growth in 10 years.
I would just I think it's a bit rich, and we won't be taking any lessons, any of these candidates standing up here, from the Liberals on fiscal responsibility. This is a government who is spending $424 billion a day. We now have $1 trillion of debt. The cost of living is going through the roof, and our unemployment rate is lower than any other country in the G7. We spent more during the pandemic, and we are further behind than any other G7 nation.
So
we care about Canadians, we care about families, we care about small businesses, we care about the economy, and we have a detailed, comprehensive, reasonable, common sense plan to get this country going again.
Then I look forward to seeing a fully costed platform. Canadians deserve to know how you're going to pay for this.
If you permit me, the rules really favor the Liberals in this regard. The Liberals have only 11 points of their platform costed. They just released their platform. Both of our parties, the NDP and the Conservatives, have put their platform in at the beginning of the election campaign, so Canadians can see our plan. and think about our plan and debate our plan and ask us questions about our plan. Our plan is comprehensive and it's robust. And
Then
it's
if you're
it
getting
will
to a
take a
balanced
little bit
budget
longer
in
to
10
get the
years,
costing, and we will
our public servants deserve to know
will
what
deliver
those
the
cuts are
fully
going to
costed
be.
budget
The question,
when it's
though,
ready.
the question though was how we're going to deal with the economy, right? We have been spending a lot of money. Susan's right. We've been spending a lot of money, and we do need to figure out how we're going to take care of that money that we're spending. And the only party that has actually come forward and come up with something concrete that will pay for what we're doing is us. We will put a tax on the wealthiest among us. Wealth over $10 million will be taxed at 1%. And we will do that because these are the people who have profited off the pandemic. These are the people who have made out well during the pandemic.
think Mr.
And it is only
Malakos-
fair they pay their fair share.
The opportunity for growth in Canada is remarkable. We have an incredibly well-educated population. We have a robust immigration policy. We need the infrastructure, modern infrastructure, to make sure we can realize our potential. High-speed internet, affordable housing, housing for an increase in the amount of housing that's available, the inventory of housing in Canada. We have a great opportunity here in this country, and I think a Conservative government will help us get back on track.
But in order to get there to the infrastructure you're talking about, we can't just be writing checks to large private companies and hoping that they'll use those checks the way we tell them to. And that's been the strategy of the Conservatives, and it's been the strategy of the Liberals. We actually need to publicly invest in infrastructure. It's
We're investing
imperative.
$80 billion since 2016 over 10 years.
Where's
Mr.
the
Malakos,
beef? Where's
Mr.
the
Malak-
beef? I'm trying to get on my Zoom calls at night in my office in Castleman, and I can't get my high-speed internet to work. So
In
it's
downtown
great to
Castleman,
it's
there's
great to
high-speed
spend-
internet.
It's great to spend all this. It's great to spend all this money and say we're spending all this money, but we need results, and we need results that are going to deliver productivity gains and quality of life enhancement for Canadians, not just spending money all over the place with no return.
Well, I take offense to that because the community in Maxville, they didn't have water. And as a long-term care center was spending $100,000 every year just to truck in water because the wells were dry. We came in, we gave them $15 million, which was paying 50% of the bill because small communities can't afford to pay the one-third formula, which, by the way, Mr. O'Toole was at the cabinet table when he implemented that particular plan. We made sure that small municipalities could get access to funding so that communities like Maxville could finally get access to water.
I completely
And Mr.
agree with that
Malakos,
plan. I completely agree with that plan. We need to be a partner, a collaborator with municipalities in the provinces, not trying to do their jobs, but partner with them so that they can realize their visions for their community.
All right, that's time. As it happens, Susan McArthur, you get the last 30 seconds on this because I asked you the question, so go ahead.
So, a Conservative government led by Erin O'Toole has a plan to grow the economy. We will make strategic infrastructure investments like high-speed internet. We will work to get small businesses back to work and keep their businesses open with specifically targeted programs to help them hire people and reinvest in their businesses. I am confident that a common sense, modern, thoughtful government led by Erin O'Toole that is competent will be the best alternative for Canadians.
Okay, let's move to the next question, which I'll direct to Konstantine Malakos. And public health officials are warning of the prospect of another lockdown if, despite the fact that a large number of Canadians have been vaccinated and have received both shots, there is still a significant number of young Canadians, 18 to 39, who have not been vaccinated. What would you do to ensure more Canadians are vaccinated so we can avoid future lockdowns?
And I'm going to be very blunt about this. I've lost votes over it. I've only told the truth when asked this question, but I get asked every day, do you support a vaccine passport? Yes, I do. I do. I think that vaccine passports make sense because we do need to get our vaccination numbers up. I also believe that federally regulated employees need to be mandated to have vaccines. The Liberals did propose that. I'm going to give credit where credit is due. But when we pushed them for a deadline, they wouldn't give us a deadline. The NDP had been pushing for September 1st as a deadline on that. And it's all well and good to make announcements about what you're going to do, but if you don't put dates and timelines behind them, they're meaningless. And then they called an election. They called an election which just basically left us
It's open to
without a
everyone
government.
now. Go ahead.
Well, I just want to retake what Mr. Malakos said. It's important to discuss with the unions representing the federal employees on how we're going to do this and what happens if an employee refuses to get double vaccinated. And I agree. Of course we have to get double vaccinated. Of course we need proof of vaccination. The proof is in the pudding. Today, the Minister of Health in Ontario said that the numbers of booking doubled. That's a good investment. It's too bad that the Premier took too long to do this, because we know in Quebec it happened quickly. In BC, they're already doing it. But I'm glad that Mr. Ford moved forward on that, because that policy works, because not everybody are anti-vaxxers. There's a certain percent of populations that are just worried. And the best advice I can give you is talk to your doctor.
But we have to also look at other barriers, because I think that a lot of people say, oh, the people who aren't vaccinated are anti-vaxxers. And I know that you didn't just say that. I'm not saying that you just said that. But what I am saying is that there are barriers to vaccination that people are facing. They may not be able to access information about the vaccine in a language they understand. They may have mobility issues in terms of getting to a vaccination point. There's many, many reasons someone may not be vaccinated that have nothing to do with the fact that they don't trust vaccines or don't believe in vaccines. And so we need to look at the systemic barriers as well and be very aware of removing those.
I think Mr. Malakos is making a great point. Like, I absolutely believe vaccines are fundamental. Aaron O'Toole and his wife, Rebecca, as many people know, got COVID and believe that in the importance of vaccination. I'm vaccinated, my kids are vaccinated. I think it's the best tool that we have in our toolkit to make sure that we don't relive another one of these pandemics and to protect people. That said, there are other tools that we have in our toolkits, including rapid testing, masking, social distancing. We want to bring people together, not divide people. That's our approach on vaccinations. We're encouraging people to be vaccinated. It's fundamentally important for people to get vaccinated. Mr. Malakos makes the point that we need to make sure they're available, easily accessible, that people understand them, that they're not worried about taking them. That is a fundamentally important aspect of this pandemic.
I'm just going to take the opportunity, since we are speaking to Glengarry-Prescott-Russell residents, to thank the firefighters, thanks all the first respondents, and Dr. Rumeliotis, who's done an incredible job in making sure that our population is vaccinated. He was telling me last week that first doses are up at 85, and they're almost at 80%, so good job, keep it up. But all I can say is that federally, we will be mandating double vaccinated Canadians. If you want to travel on the plane, if you want to go on a train, you're going to have to be double vaxxed. Otherwise, you can't get on. And that is good, smart public policy, because the other option is lockdowns. And I don't want to go back to lockdowns. I didn't see my dad. I didn't see my family during Christmas. So the proof of vaccination is a tool, and it's a useful tool. It's not going to last forever. It's only going to last until we can get through this pandemic. And we have to support public health measures.
But we also have to, I agree, we have to, thanks to the essential workers and those who worked hard during the pandemic. But also we have to be, we were thanking the essential workers at grocery stores, but yet they got a little bit of a wage top up at the beginning of the pandemic that was given to them voluntarily for goodwill from the big corporate giants, and they took it away. They did it for a little bit of positive PR, and then they took it away. These types of things like hero pay, these should be mandated. We should be taking better care. We saw that the essential workers are some of the worst treated workers in our country. Some of the workers who live with the worst conditions, who are working full time and are still living in poverty, who are paying way more than the 30% of what they make for housing that economists tell us you can pay without being in poverty. But I don't need to talk to an economist to know that. I just need to talk to a person in Hawkesbury who's spending 60% of what they make on housing. So and is an essential worker we're spending all this time thanking, but they can't make ends meet. So I think that the pandemic has really shone a light on the inequities in this country in a way that's really that should fundamentally change things.
I think the fundamental question we have to ask ourselves is, we're entering a fourth wave. Why are we in the middle of an election? Why do we need an election now? When I go door to door, people are worried about COVID. They're worried about the fourth wave. They're worried what's going to happen. Are their kids going to be able to stay in school? There's absolutely no reason to have an election right now.
I'm glad you're bringing this up. I'm bringing this up.
Why are we in an election? Why are we having an election now when people don't want it? It's expensive. It's irresponsible. And quite frankly...
So why did your party vote to take us down many, many times in the House of Commons? Yes, you did. There were confidence motion. If the government loses a confidence motion, we are in an election. And by the way, Aaron O'Toole wasn't...
One at a time.
Aaron O'Toole was not complaining about an election when Scott Moe called it, or Premier Higgs. And Jagmeet Singh was out campaigning with the BC Premier out there, because it's okay for Conservatives government to call an election in the middle of a pandemic.
We're talking about a federal election
Yes.
heading into a fourth
Right.
wave
So why did
of
your
a
party
pandemic,
try to take us
where
down
people
before
are
and
trying-
slow down legislation?
Where people are trying to enjoy the dying days of summer and get their kids back to school. This is fundamentally irresponsible of this Liberal government. And
Then
it's
your
all
government-
about
your party should have
Justin
not taken
Trudeau
us down.
wanting a majority government.
Okay, we'll go back to Konstantine Malakos. You get the final 30 seconds on this.
I agree that we should not be in an election right now. It makes absolutely no sense to be in a federal election right now, not just because of the pandemic. The pandemic's a huge part of this, but there's instability in Afghanistan. There are so many reasons why our government should be focused on governing right now and not on an election. So much legislation died on the Senate floor because of the fact that they decided to call this election. Vital legislation. The fact of the matter is minority governments work.
That's time. Thank you. We'll move to the next question for Danielle Lapierre of the Green Party. What is your plan for childcare, and what else would you do to make life more affordable for Canadian families?
First, we have to take care of the poor people. Like, it's very important. Like, we must put some money in the organism who take care of the poor people, and we have to tax more the rich people to give back to the middle class.
Okay, it's open to everyone now. Go ahead.
Well, I'd like to talk about our childcare policy because it is an important one. And if there's one thing that we've noticed during the pandemic is the fact that women cannot get back into the workforce because they can't afford childcare. So our position is we will bring $10 childcare to every family in the country. We've already signed 8 deals with provinces. We look forward to continuing our work with Ontario so we can get through that. But childcare policy is economic policy. And I know what the Conservatives are proposing is a tax credit. That's not going to create one single child care space in our riding. And in fact, there is a long list in our riding. I've had to wait. There's a 300-person child long list in my own community of Russell, and I couldn't get access to childcare. I need to fight for other families to get access to childcare. And speaking of childcare, the important part is we also put a clause for Francophone families who need access to childcare in the language of their choice.
It's fundamentally important to expand the workforce, especially for women who have been disproportionately impacted by COVID. We approach childcare in a very different way. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution. We have a tax credit that will go directly into the pockets of Canadian families who are trying to get back to work and need that money right now so that they can go and work at their jobs. It's quite a different approach than saying, oh, over 10 years, we'll try and build, $10 daycare and we'll alleviate all the waiting lists. This is not realistic and it's not going to happen. We want to get money in the genes of families today so that they can get back to work and participate in the economy, especially women. Women, we don't all have the same kinds of jobs. Not everybody works 9 to 5. Our plan acknowledges that and is flexible and enables people to live their lives that they want, the way they want to live it, without having to adhere to a one-size-fits-all plan.
There may be a lot of childcare spaces in Toronto or childcare centers in Toronto, but in Glengarry-Prescott-Russell, families don't have a choice. There's not a childcare center in every corner of our community. There simply isn't. So we need to build more capacity in the riding. And we do that. The federal government's not completely involved, but we're giving an incentive for provinces to partner with us so they can build more capacity. And that's something that we've done with provinces, including Conservative premiers. They agree it's a smart economic policy.
But see, this is what drives me crazy about the Liberals, because in 2015, a cornerstone of the NDP platform in 2015 was that we wanted to bring in $10 a day childcare. We wanted to do it in partnership with the provinces, working with the provinces. It looked a lot like the current Liberal plan. And at the time, the Liberals gaslit us by saying that it was not, that we were stamping on jurisdiction and that we did not have jurisdictional authority to do it. And yet here they are campaigning on basically that same premise. We still support it. We never stopped supporting it. In the 6 years that the Liberals have been in office not doing it, we supported the idea and would have partnered with them on it. Another reason an election didn't need to be called right now if they want to champion childcare, because they would have had a willing partner in us to do it. But in
Malakos,
2015, when we brought it up, you said it wasn't our jurisdiction. You did.
It
Mr.
is
Malakos,
important. I'm sorry, Monsieur Drouin, but it is important for Canadians to know, and for the residents of Glengarry-Prescott-Russell to know, that the Liberals have been promising $10 a day daycare since 1993. All of a sudden, they woke up on the eve of an election that we don't need to have, that no one wants to have, and now they're promising that they're going to do this
Except we
in
have
4
8
years.
formal deals signed with provinces. And Mr. Malakos, you should talk to Charlie Angus, because he killed the childcare deal back in 2005. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking about this. Your party brought the childcare deals that was signed by Ken Dryden with all the provinces, and now we're still talking about childcare deals 15 years later.
What were you saying about childcare in 2015 when we were campaigning on it? What were you saying then? You were saying it
Childcare
was
is a great idea.
jurisdictional issue.
An idea. This is the problem with the Liberals. It's always ideas. There's never any execution on these policies. And Canadians are starting to figure that out. They're starting to figure out that Justin Trudeau talks a good line, but he doesn't deliver the goods.
Okay. Thank you, but Conservative premiers would disagree with you, because we've signed a childcare deal with Manitoba. We've signed a childcare deal with an NDP government.
The devil is in the details.
There's 8 deals
when are these going to be delivered?
With the provincial governments.
Signed at the very, very end of right before an election so that you can campaign on it. And
it was presented in the budget.
Why was this not done earlier when you could actually show that it's done? Because now we have to vote for you one more time in order for you to implement it, and then you get to campaign on it again. Canadians are sick of this game. This is the game the Liberals play, and they've been playing for years. Canadians are tired of this game. I'm tired of this game, and I'm also tired of inaction from the Conservatives. I'm tired of watching one take over from the other and nothing getting better for people who are just struggling to make ends meet in this country.
Okay, we can stop there. Danielle Lapierre, we'll go back to you. You get the final 30 seconds on this topic. Go ahead.
Yes, for now, it's easy to say $10 per day. I had child, and the most important thing is to find a place to put the child. And maybe before we put the $10 daycare, we should put, make sure we have the place. We have to build a place, or find a place to make the kids when we are going working.
Okay, thank you. Francis Drouin, the next question is for you. It's come up a couple of times already, but why was this election necessary when you could have simply kept governing and implemented all the things that you've been talking about?
Yeah, there's
so
been
far today?
5 provincial elections in Canada during the pandemic, and they've all been conducted safely. In fact, there was a by-election, federal by-election, which was conducted safely. But I was one of the lucky members of Parliament close to the Hill that would go about once a week when I had my other Zoom, and I'd watch the opposition parties say, yeah, we want to work with you, but they would do everything in their power to slow down legislation. I didn't go to Ottawa to drag my feet. I went to Ottawa to work. And the NDP and the Conservatives, and to a certain extent, even the Greens were delaying C-12 at a parliamentary committee. I think it's important to have an election. I think it's important that Canadians will be able to express themselves. In 2019, none of the candidates were talking about a pandemic and how we're going to respond. Now, as we are moving out of this pandemic, we need a new vision, and Canadians need to have a say.
It's open to everyone now.
It's interesting you bring up C-12 and you bring up a lot of other legislation, but what the Liberals did in the last Parliament was that they put out a lot of very vital legislation that progressives would have a hard time disagreeing with right in the 11th hour of the Parliament, one after the other, so that they could then campaign on the obstruction of other parties and talk about how they need to be reelected to enact these things. They'd been in power for 6 years at that time. It's so cynical. It's so cynical. And this is why the winner of the last election in Glengarry-Prescott-Russell did not vote. That's the reason. This is the reason. Did not vote, won the election, because everybody is tired of this cynicism.
I think it's interesting. So the total deficit in the last budget was $354 billion. That was a lot of spending that Canadians needed rightly to get through the pandemic. If this government was having such a hard time governing because it couldn't work with the other parties, how did they manage to get $354 billion of spending through the House of Commons? That is a ridiculous point by Monsieur Drouin.
Well, I'll give you a perfect example. It's not normal that a fall economic statement, which is presented in the fall, is passed after the budget has been introduced in the House. That is not normal. That's because your party and your colleagues were dragging their feet and presenting dilatory motions after dilatory motions so we couldn't get legislation through.
You got so much legislation through. You passed the biggest transfer of money from the government to individuals in Canadian history for many, many, many decades during the pandemic, and you did it because the NDP was willing to work with you on that. You wanted to give people $1,000 a month. We pushed for $2,000 a month. You wanted to create a 10% wage subsidy. We pushed, and we
Mr.
got it
Malakos,
to 75%.
just hold on a second.
But the fact of the matter is you had to work with other parties. You had to work, and liberals don't like having to work with other parties.
You're taking credit where credit is not due to your party. You keep saying that the NDP fought for 75%. No, it hasn't. It was Dan Kelly, the president of the Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses, that asked for that, not your party.
We were actually pushing for more.
And you responded correctly to the demands because it made sense. And I'm glad that the wage subsidy supported many businesses in our riding. I'm glad that the rental subsidy supported many businesses in the riding because it made an impact. But now we're at a time, yes, it did work well for the first 6 months. I'll give you maybe 8 months. And after that, you guys dragged your feet in the House so we couldn't pass legislation.
You tried to kill it while we were still in the middle of the pandemic and people were still relying on it. And so we fought and we got it extended. We did get it extended, and we were very proud to get it extended. That's the thing about minority governments. Minority governments are elected by people because they want multiple voices in Parliament. They want there to be negotiation in Parliament, and they're supposed to work that way. And in a minority government, the party that forms government has to work with the other parties, and that's the way they're supposed to work.
And they work well at the beginning, but history proves you wrong.
Let's talk about,
But it was still working.
about this Liberal platform. Let's talk about the Liberal platform. A quote from a journalist, Paul Wells: "A blueprint for incoherence and a lousy government." Does that sound like something that we absolutely fundamentally need to go to the polls for? I don't think so. I don't think so. You know, $100 billion from the last budget wasn't enough. Now they have to add another $78 billion. So I think there's absolutely no reason for us to be in election now.
I'm glad you want to talk about McLean journalists because they're asking, where's your costing?
Well, our costing will be out very shortly.
I've never seen that in my 30 years of following politics, a conservative government or conservative party not even present a costing platform.
Perhaps you haven't seen such an innovative, complete, and modern platform. We spent a lot of time and effort delivering a plan to Canadians so that they could read it, second day of the election, debate it, ask questions about it. When did you release your platform?
And a lot of that money was spent on glossy paper and retouching pictures of O'Toole to make it look like a slick magazine too.
That is not true. In fact, we didn't print very many copies. I tried to get one, I couldn't. I had to print it myself. That is not true. We did not print very many copies of that. But it's a fantastic document, and people actually are asking me for it.
We did release the platform after yours, except we did the homework. We costed it. There was an economist that did it. Parliamentary budget officer looked at it and costed and agreed with the costing of the platform. What they don't agree, though, is that 3% growth that somehow magically is going to happen in the next 10 years, and we need to see the numbers whether or not it actually supports the Conservative plan.
It is not surprising that a Liberal candidate would not think that we could achieve 3% growth, because under their government, growth has just flatlined or gone down. It is time to get the economy moving again, and a Conservative government will do that. It will create jobs and get the economy moving again. That's what we should be doing.
Employers are not asking in the riding to create jobs. They're asking about access to labor. We have lots of jobs in Glengarry-Prescott-Russell, but we need the labor.
The fundamental issue is that people on this stage are looking at the economy through the lens of Bay Street. And I mean, it makes a lot of sense. Susan has made a lot of her money in large firms as a CEO on that level, C-suite jobs. And And I'm not knocking that as a career path. It's a valid
I hope
career
not.
path, but that is not the reality of the bulk of people in ridings like Glengarry-Prescott-Russell who don't know where their next meal is coming from, who are worried about the rent, who are worried about very fundamental bread and butter issues. And I judge the economy by how well they are doing.
Okay, we'll stop there. Francis Drouin, you have the final 30 seconds on this. Go ahead.
Well, thanks for the debate. I sincerely appreciate it. But you can clearly see the Conservatives don't have a costed platform. It doesn't make any sense. No economist is agreeing that there's going to be a 3% growth every single year for the next 10 years. And that begs the question, and I'm talking to all the public servants who are listening to us tonight. You remember what Aaron O'Toole at the cabinet table did with Stephen Harper? That was called the Deficit Reduction Action Plan. They didn't campaign on that in 2011. They just said, we're going to balance the budget in 2015, and then sold GM shares and made major cuts.
Thank you. All right, let's move to the next question, which I will address to Susan McArthur of the Conservative Party. Given the rising alarm bells from international organizations about the severity of the climate crisis, should we not be aiming for higher emissions reduction targets rather than lower emissions reduction targets?
So I think the importance of targets is actually meeting your targets. So yeah, we can put whatever we want, like the Liberals do. We're going to do this, we're going to do that. They never reach their targets. What we have is a sensible, thoughtful, achievable plan to address greenhouse gas emissions. Canada is looking for and has some incredible expertise in this area, and we actually have come to the table with some very innovative proposals that will actually help Canadians participate and do their part in reducing greenhouse gas emissions.
Okay, it's open to everyone now. Go ahead.
The day after the Conservatives debated at their convention whether climate change was real, Leah Gazan of the NDP put forward a motion in Parliament. The Liberals put fundraising emails out trying to fundraise on the fact that the Conservatives were debating the existence of climate change. Then Leah Gazan, the very next day, put forward a motion to address climate change, and the Liberals voted it down. So we remain the only party who is really ready to take concrete action on climate change. I am the only well, actually, Danielle is with me. So the two of us are the only two candidates on the stage who have taken a firm position on COLISEM and committed to trying to do everything we can about it from a federal level, trying to get involved in the dossier. We're the only two candidates willing to take that position.
How much money did you contribute to the fund? Did you contribute any dollars to actually fight it, or just using words?
I want
to talk about the environmental plan of the Conservative Party.
Mr.
The Conservative Party, back in 2008, I remember Stephen Harper said I was going to put $65 per ton on carbon emissions. O'Toole is proposing a $50 per ton on carbon emissions in 2030. All economists, all climate scientists agree it is not good enough. It needs to be at $170, which is what we're proposing. We've been forthright with Canadians. This sends a clear market signals. We've said that we'll ban gas cars everywhere in Canada by 2035. We're electrifying the infrastructure so people can get access to charging stations. That is a real plan for the environment.
But it's not fast enough. The Liberal plan is not making the change.
Then why did Thomas Mulcair say that our plan was marvelous? Why did Andrew Weaver, the former BC Green Party leader, said our plan, he was actually endorsing the Liberal plan?
Tom Mulcair is no longer the leader of the NDP. We're talking about the NDP today, and we were talking about what the position of the NDP today.
Isn't
and we will want to be more.
It's interesting how the Liberals like to do that, right? They like to run against the people that aren't their actual competitors, because they don't actually like to run on their own track record. So, sorry I interrupted you, but go ahead.
That's all I had to say.
So, you know, I think from a Conservative point of view, as I said, we have reasonable, achievable targets, and I think Canadians want that. They're sick of having these pie-in-the-sky targets that we can't, quite frankly, achieve and haven't been able to achieve under a Liberal government. We will have a responsible and balanced plan, and we're doing innovative things. We'll have innovation in buildings, we'll support a green economy, we'll look at carbon capture, and let's not forget, greenhouse gas emissions is a global issue. It is not, you know, carbon molecules don't just respect the borders. So we have an incredible asset in Canada, which is clean natural gas, which we should be exporting to underdeveloped nations so that they can use our clean natural gas instead of burning carbon, which is happening at a rapid pace in places like China.
So this is a conservative argument that Canada is not contributing significantly enough for us to make a huge difference in the world. And it's pure math. It's simple. The sum of all countries emitting less than 4% of carbon emissions is greater than 50% of global emissions. And that's why it's important that Canada does its part so other countries will join us. That's why we signed the Paris Agreement. And that's why we'll continue.
But we remain the only G7 nation to have signed the Paris Agreement who have not met our Paris Agreement targets. We
We're
remain
2030,
the only
Mr.
G7.
Malakos. We're not 2030 yet.
We are the only, but 2030 is not, we need to act faster than that. In this country right now, in Glengarry-Prescott-Russell, there were air quality advisories due to forest fires in Sudbury that are a result of climate change. In the riding, this is very much an active fire right now. We can't wait till 2030 to put out a fire.
I wanna come back to that
air
point.
quality. That's why we're proposing to shut down all coal plants and coal exportation in Canada. I think that's an important policy.
Well, we could
It made a
start by fighting to
huge
stop a
difference.
cement
It
plant
made a
right here in
huge
Glengarry-Prescott-Russell.
difference in
We could
Ontario.
start there.
Yes, and you don't know that community, and you're making false commitment, and shame on you.
Yeah,
I
but
would like
we
to
are
come
not
back
in
to the
2000.
point, if we really believe, and we all do, that this is an urgent matter, the climate and climate change, then the best thing we can do is export our clean natural gas to underdeveloped countries who are burning coal.
Okay, Danielle Lapierre.
Okay, Mr. Drouin says we are not in 2030 right now. I know, but if we check what is done since the last 6 years, the greenhouse gases has increased, not decreased. We cannot increase and then instead it will decrease. At one point, we have to make a choice. Like, we have to stop to invest in the oil and gas, and we have to turn for the green energy. We have no choice. The United Nations already ring the red alarm. It's too late now. We have to do something right now. We have to stop to invest in oil and gas and cement plant, and we have
We're not
to put
investing in a
green-
cement plant, by the way, so we have an
You
important
have
duty to
put
make
the
sure
law
that the
to
green
protect the
transition
people that you
doesn't
said you're
leave
going to
any family
protect.
behind. If we leave family behind, they can't put food on their table, they can't find shelter, they're not going to care about environment. And that, as a government, as an MP, I have a responsibility to make sure that we don't leave anybody behind.
So let's
And
stop
your
leaving
plan-
people behind then. There is poverty is out of control in Glengarry-Prescott-Russell, and the NDP has put forward multiple ideas to try to address it, and they've all been shot down by the Liberals. We had
Canada
a
Child Benefit is supporting 13,000 families in Glengarry-Prescott-Russell.
How
that
did you
brings
vote
them
on Danielle
effectively
Blakey's
out of poverty.
proposition to lift the disabled community out of poverty? How did you vote on our proposition to give dental care to Canadians? Actually, I have a quotation. Francis Drouin.
Mr.
We do
Mr.
not have
Malakos.
comprehensive data on unmet dental care needs at a national level, as he votes to prevent Canadians from having
And
access
the
to
false
dental
promise
care.
of Mr. Malakos is that there was not one single penny attached to that motion because members of parliament can't present a private member's bill with money attached to it. And you are misleading residents in Glengarry-Prescott-Russell with that motion.
Okay,
just trying
let's
to
stop
fight for
there.
them.
I asked you the question, Susan McArthur, so please go ahead. You have 30 seconds to wrap up.
Sorry, we're at wrap up now already?
On this question.
No, to wrap up on this question.
Sorry, I
Yeah.
got so taken up by the debate on the climate change. Sorry about that. So listen, the truth is we have a plan. We have a realizable plan. We have some incredible assets in Canada that we should be utilizing. We've got innovation in carbon capture. We've got innovation in building technologies. We've got an ability to really do better on this file, and we are committed to doing that. We want to set targets that are achievable and that we can be proud of and that we can attain, as opposed to just talking and setting these targets that, quite frankly, the Liberals have never met.
Okay, thank you. Next question is for Konstantine Malakos on the subject of health care. Because of the pandemic and because of other issues, health care has been somewhat overshadowed in this campaign. It's obviously still very important to Canadians. And I want to, as much as possible, leave aside the political rhetoric and talk specifically about what each of you would do to improve health care in Canada. So you get the first shot at this.
Of course. So transfers from the federal government to the provinces for healthcare used to be 50%. Those numbers started to go down, went down under Harper. And the Trudeau campaigned on bringing the amount of funding to the provinces for healthcare, the amount in transfers to provinces for healthcare back up. But he left the cuts in place. Now, at this point, the federal government is only contributing 22% to healthcare. That's not okay. The results of that are poorer healthcare. We're seeing it across the board. We're seeing lack of doctors in rural communities. We're seeing so much is not happening for people. We also need to expand healthcare to include teeth, to include optometry, to include mental health. It needs to be truly universal.
It's open to everyone now on the subject of healthcare.
Well,
and
for
your healthcare plans.
during the pandemic, for every dollar that's been spent in the province of Ontario, that was 80%, all related to whether it was helping kids get back to school so they have proper ventilation systems, or helping pay for the healthcare system. 80% of that was paid by the federal government. We're proposing to invest to bring 7,500 doctors and nurses in rural areas, which I think is important in our community. What we've also noticed during the pandemic is that standards for long-term care are not the same, which is extremely important in a community like Glengarry-Prescott-Russell, where family lives on both sides of the river. I believe that if you're in Quebec or in Ontario, you should get the same level of care, and that's exactly what we'll be doing.
A national
and
standard
the other
is
thing
good.
that we are doing is $6.5 billion of transfer for mental health. Mental health has been an issue. I'm sure all of us are knocking on doors and noticing that people have talked about their mental health, whether it's for kids or for parents. I believe that it's important that we put a transfer specific for mental health. And we are doing that.
So this is one of the problems that you will notice with Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau runs around trying to do everybody else's job. He doesn't do his own job. He's out there telling the premiers what they should do about long-term care, telling them what they should do about health care, telling them how many doctors they should hire. That is not federal responsibility. That is provincial responsibility. Justin Trudeau should be paying attention to the borders. He should be setting reasonable, predictable, thoughtful transfer amounts to the provinces and let them do their job. He should do his job.
We need to have national standards for long-term care, but it's not enough to have a national standard for long-term care. Rivera, Chartwell, all these large corporations make out like bandits. They make so much money off of the care of our elders while they give them lower and lower levels of service. This is not okay. 80% of deaths at the beginning of the pandemic were in long-term care homes. This is due to neglect, and it's not neglect of the people who work there. The people who work there are good people. But I talk to them, and they tell me they have 4 minutes to change an elderly person because they are overworked. They're understaffed, and it's because the interests of Bay Street investors are being put ahead of the care of our elders, and that is not okay. And it's not just our elders, it's members of the disabled community as well. Too often when we talk about long-term care, members of the disabled community are left out of the conversation. They are some of the most impoverished people in this country, and it's due to policy, and we need to change that. But the fact of the matter is that many of them are in long-term care as well, and the care is substandard, and it is because it is on a for-profit model. It should be part of universal health care. It should not be private, and private enterprises have one interest and one interest only, and that is to make as much money as they can for shareholders.
I want to bring up a point that Ms. McArthur brought with regards to the federal government not being involved in long-term care centers. I agree with that, but when provinces, like my own community, was asking for the Red Cross to come into our community because there wasn't enough workers, then that becomes a federal jurisdiction. When a province is asking for the Army to come into a long-term care center, it now becomes a federal problem. So I'm happy, and one of the issues that we've noticed is that the lack of support and pay, Mr. Malakos will agree with me, personal support workers are not making enough dollars, and that had a huge impact, especially in rural communities, and I'm proud that we'll be presenting a plan to pay them $25 because they work hard and they deserve a good pay.
But they also need to be properly staffed. They cannot be overworked the way they are.
I think if the federal government had done their job, if Justin Trudeau had done their job, if we had a strategic stockpile as opposed to nothing in the cupboard, if he had controlled the borders at the beginning of the pandemic, like other people were calling on him to do, then maybe we wouldn't have found ourselves in this situation. So, you know, we need to be able to have a federal government that understands their job, stays in their lane, and does it well,
So
as
I guess
opposed to
the entire world
trying to do everybody else's job, which is what Justin Trudeau does.
Yeah.
If you want to talk about
readiness, the entire world
readiness,
failed on the global pandemic. This is what the Conservative Party is saying. Somehow Canada failed, but it's a global pandemic. every country didn't do as they should have done, but we've been there to support our workers. We've been there to support Canadians when provinces were shutting down the economy. We supported them. We supported businesses so we could build a bridge.
But if we want to talk about readiness for the next pandemic, I think that's an important conversation.
I agree.
I have one word, and that is, we used to have a publicly owned company in this country. We had a publicly owned company in this country that was producing, that was doing innovative research on different diseases and creating medications, creating vaccines right in this country. It was sold by Brian Mulroney, and successive Liberal and Conservative governments have not done anything about it. And that company is no longer in Canada.
So that company was called Connaught Biosciences,
Connaught,
and it
thank
still
you.
exists in Toronto. They have massive labs there. The problem with this pandemic is we have the Trudeau government has no relationship whatsoever with pharmaceutical companies. In fact, their first
Then why is
stop,
Moderna
where
proposing to build a
where was
plant?
their first stop when we needed
We
a
shouldn't be
vaccine for
looking at
Canada?
bringing
Their
another
first stop
corporation, and
One
we
at a
should be
time,
looking at
please.
a
One
Their
at a
first
time.
stop when we needed vaccines for Canada was CanSino Biosciences, a Chinese startup. That's where Justin Trudeau put his money and put
We signed
put the
contracts with
list
Moderna
of
in
Canadians.
July. We
Your
signed
first
contracts
stop
with
was
Pfizer in
CanSino
August.
Biosciences.
If you're both talking at the same time, nobody will hear what you're saying. So please wait
Fair
until the
enough.
other person is
Okay,
finished.
go ahead.
Who wants to go next?
Well, we've signed contracts with both Pfizer and Moderna. Today, Canada's #1 in terms of vaccination rates. So I understand that Michelle Rempel was saying that no Canadian was going to get vaccinated before 2030, but that's the type of malargia that we've had in the House of Commons. We're focused on facts. Moderna is now proposing to build a plant in Canada because we've partnered with them.
But they could just leave. It's a private enterprises are not tied to the country.
Well,
When
we're
you
not
have a
all
crown
communists,
corporation-
I'll
Mr.
let,
Malakos.
you're going to have the last 30 seconds
Okay.
anyway, so I'll let Susan McArthur have a few seconds here.
So the challenge is we were 4 months behind on vaccines. That's 4 months of businesses closed because we didn't have the right strategic procurement strategy for vaccines. And it's not the Liberal government that stepped up to the plate and gotten vaccinated, it's Canadians. And it's to Canadians we know an enormous debt of gratitude, and the healthcare workers that helped implement the plan. We have one of the best records in the
time.
world, and we should
Thank
be
you.
proud of that.
Yeah.
Konstantine Malakos, go ahead. You've got the last 30 seconds on this.
We should not be looking to private enterprises to solve our problems. When it comes to essential infrastructure, we need crown corporations. We need to control it. Canada needs, the biggest stakeholder needs to be the Canadian government. And the reason for that is clear. Because when we have a private company, their allegiance is to their shareholders. And so they need to make as much money as possible for their shareholders. But things that are essential, the goal should just be
That's time.
results.
Thank you. That brings us to the end of our debates, but we're going to wrap up now with some closing statements. And again, each candidate will have 1 minute, and we'll start with the Liberal candidate, Francis Drouin. Go ahead.
Good evening. Tonight you've heard a sharp contrast between the vision I'm proposing for our community and other parties. A vision that allows mothers to get back to the workforce with $10 per day for childcare. A vision that presents a bold plan to fight climate change while growing our economy. A vision that supports our official languages. And a vision that finishes the fight once and for all against COVID-19. I was born and raised in Hawkesbury, went to school in Vankleek, lived in Rockland, and now reside in Russell. I love this community, and I strongly believe in it. I think it's important to live in this community if we want to represent it. I'm the only one who can say that out of my main rivals. I was the only Liberal to stand up in Parliament because I made a commitment to 2 farmers. When you live in your community, your commitment matters. So on September 20th, I'm asking you to elect a strong local voice. Thank you.
Thank you. Danielle Lapierre, representing the Green Party, you're next.
Don't be worried, don't be afraid. Putting the Green Party in power will be no worse than the Quiet Revolution. That which gave Quebec an incredible green energy and strengthened their health and education system. It is clear from history that the current government are not ready to take the change that we need. The Green Party is ready. We are faced with climate and social crisis. It is time to get up, be daring, and take a green turn. I hope that this fall, from coast to coast, Canada will turn green.
Thank you. All right, Konstantine Malakos, you're next representing the NDP.
I am going to take a minute to address what Francis brought up in his closing remarks. It is true. I live 3 minutes outside of the riding. I live 3 minutes from Glen Robertson, Ontario, on the extreme edge of the riding. But my day-to-day life is in Alexandria and has been since I moved to the region, and I work in Vankleek Hill. This is a riding that I believe in fundamentally. It is a place that I love, and it is a place where I have chosen to create a life. And so I know the people of the riding, and I want to fight for the people of the riding. And I think that that is very fundamentally important. What's important is that you're ready to fight for the people of the riding. And I will talk to people at the door. I'll talk to people at the door in Castleman, in Hawkesbury, in Rockland, and in the many, many small towns that make this riding amazing. And they are not feeling like they're being fought for in our parliament right now. They are struggling in many, many ways, and they are not feeling represented. I want to represent the most marginalized people in the riding.
Okay, thank you. Finally, Susan McArthur, the Conservative candidate, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank you, Mr. Sutcliffe, and the other candidates. I hope this debate was informative. I certainly found it was. I'd also like to thank the people of Glengarry-Prescott-Russell who have opened their doors to me and shared their worries and hopes and ideas, and in a time of COVID, which is quite difficult for them. I have to say, it's a humbling experience to be knocking on doors in this riding and listening to you, and it is also I feel the weight of responsibility of representing you and working for you. I'm a really hard worker, and I really would like to represent you in Ottawa. It's clear the Liberal government is tired, and it has no plan to offer Canadians. What I've heard at the doors is that it's time for a change. The Conservative Party is the only alternative to Justin Trudeau. We have a plan to secure jobs, secure accountability, secure mental health, secure our country, and secure Canada's economy. On September 20th, the choice is clear. Vote
Okay.
Conservative.
Thank you. Thank you to all the candidates for participating in our debate, and good luck the rest of the way in the campaign.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that concludes our debate for Glengarry-Prescott-Russell. Thank you for watching.